Okay, in the last video, we set up the two scatter plots for the impact of driving on earnings. And so let's take a look at them. So when it comes to accuracy, or if you're super accurate, is that going to help your earnings? Well, if we're looking at it, actually, you look up here, these people that are cresting right around 70, they're not really the top earners. If you look here, the cluster of top earners are in the 50s, in the 50 percentage. So accuracy on the drive really doesn't appear to matter much. But now we go over here and we look at yards per drive and how the data is scattered together. It's definitely those that can drive farther and end up making more money. So as long as you can drive it out there, you have a better chance of making more money than if you're really accurate with your drive. So distance matters. And if you look at the top, the top earners, it's for the most part over 290. So accuracy isn't all that critical. In fact, if we look, the highest earners are a little bit under 60%. But then again, it is all about jacking that ball out there as quick as you can. Okay, so now let's look at question 4, which is the putting, the short game. And in golf, they will tell you that's what matters the most. So we're going to do the same kind of thing. I'm going to look at my average putts per hole. I'm going to, average putts per hole. Control for all my earnings, and there we go. We're going to insert our scatter diagram, and we're going to take a look at this one. And actually, what am I doing? I apologize. It's impact of putting. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Oh, that is the right chart, so let's throw that one down. Control X to copy that, and we're going to throw that right down. Once again, let's put our axes in. We just always want to clean these things up to make sure everything's right. And so this is our earnings, and then this is our putts per hole. Now, one thing you'll notice too is I'm trying to be very consistent with how I'm naming things. These are all earnings. So once you do something like that, you want to make sure you're consistent throughout your document, throughout your presentation, because consistency is going to make things look a lot more professional. Okay, so we look at this top earners. If you look at it, we're all low putts per hole. Because once again, if you're playing the par game 2, you're supposed to be putting 2 per hole. These guys are all below 2, which is great. But the ones that are really making a lot of money are very few putts, lowest putts per hole. So short game is essential in golf. Once again, if you play, you probably know that. And that's why actually you can look back through here and it'd be interesting to see how these people correlated up with the accuracy on the drive and the range on the drive, because it really doesn't matter how accurate the drive is. You get close to the hole and you can play the short game. So that'd be another interesting thing of data to look for. Okay, so now what I want to do is let's look at that fourth one. So using a trend line, build a function to predict earnings based on cuts made. So we go back here, we have our earnings, we have our cuts made. So just quickly looking down through here, there's no gaps in the cuts made, so we are fine with that. So our cuts made, control, hit our earnings, insert our scatter plot, and then I'm going to control X to cut that, and into the earnings, control V to paste it. Once again, quickly, let's clean this up. And earnings. And then on the bottom, we have cuts made. Okay, now as we look at it, earnings versus cuts made, there seems to be a general trend in there. And so what we're going to do is now we're going to fit a trend line to it. And a trend line is a curve fit. We're going to try to best approximate this data with a curve. And then we are going to generate an equation for that. And with that equation, we're going to be able to say, okay, well, if you made 30 cuts based on this trend that we put in, what would the earnings be? And so you got a couple different ways you can do it. You can go to design, add chart elements, trend line. You can here at the block, go to trend line. You can right click on things and go add trend line. So however you want to do it. So as we go to trend line, we've got a couple different options. You have a linear trend line, which is going to be, y is equal to mx plus b. You can fit it to a logarithmic function, a polynomial function of whatever order you want. You can have a power trend line, so things that'll be to the e to some power. You can calculate out a moving average, and that's actually helpful when you're doing stocks and things like that. But we're going to do a linear trend line. Now, a couple things. We want to display the equation on the chart because we want to know what that equation is, and I also want to display the r-squared value. And so as you can see, I have my trend line there, little dots. You can change that to whatever you want it to be. We have this box here. I typically like to take that and fill that box in, and actually we can throw a little outline around it too. The reason I fill that box in is it's sitting here inside the grid lines. It looks sloppy, and that just gives it a cleaner appearance. Okay, so what do I have here? I have my equation y equals mx plus b, and so that tells me that my earnings, which is going to be the y, my earnings is going to be 17,000. Try that again. 171,190 times the number of cuts that I've made minus 787,741. So that's going to be my equation. So if we type that out, earnings in dollars is going to equal 171,190 times cuts made minus 787,741, and we'll put a comma in there. And so that is our linear trend equation. So you can say, okay, well, if we made 20 cuts, this is what our earnings should be. This is a simple linear regression. We're going to be doing a lot of linear regressions later in the class, but this is a very simplistic one. What does r squared mean? R squared is kind of a measure of the fitness of the data. Not fitness as in how physically fit it is, but fitness, how well it fits that equation. So r squared 0.2976 fits okay. Basically, that's saying that 29.7% of the variation can be explained by the variables that we're using. But r squared is a powerful little thing. It's a powerful little tool that'll give us, so as we're trying to evaluate between different models to figure out what is the best and what is not. Okay, so next we want to go and start talking about correlation. Specifically, we want to look at the correlation between earnings and cut made. So basically, we're going to look at the correlation of the data that we've graphed here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use an Excel function called correl, which is going to give us the correlation between two data sets. And so those two data sets that we want to use are going to be earnings versus cuts made. So if we go into data, and so we're going to go cuts made, so we're going to select this data and say, okay, well, that's my first array, and my second array is going to be my earnings. And that will be it. We'll close that. And so we have a positive correlation. So as our cuts made go up, we have a positive correlation, which means that our earnings will go up. So they go together. If we had a negative correlation, if that was a negative number, what would happen is the more cuts that would have made, the less earnings that we would have. So an interesting thing about correlation is basically the square root of r squared. So r squared is is basically the square of correlation. So let's figure out if it is. At least it's supposed to be. So we're going to take our correlation, we are going to square it. And 1 second. I said 1 second because I'm like, well, r squared should be 297. I made a mistake. It's d87 times 2. We're going to change that to squared. And there we go, r squared value. So correlation is r. So r squared, 297. 297, we are in good shape. That is great. A lot of times, too, you always want to go back and check those equations because sometimes you mess things up. Sometimes you don't do things, you don't quite get them right. Okay, so I'm going to end the video here. And so what we're going to do next in the next video is we're going to build the correlation table. So now we have this one correlation just between cuts made and earnings. Well, I want to build a table so I can look at the correlation between any of these different things. So remember earlier I was talking about, I was kind of interested to see, you know, the people that on the high earning side with putts per hole, if they're, you know, how these all work together, and that'll kind of help us down here. So next video, part 3, we will talk about these last parts of this problem.